Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as the Greenskins against the Warriors of Chaos, led by TGW the Birdum, on the map MP Heorot Ridge. And this time around we are running I think a fairly conventional build, but I did want to try out the new Black Orcs, of course, because Black Orcs have been buffed pretty significantly in this past patch. Both their melee attack and melee defense, and or I guess in Mortal Empires, as well as their weapon strength. Actually, I do believe has gone up. So these guys are absolute beasts, and they also have crazy HP. I do believe they now have the highest HP of any infantry in the game, HP per model. So for my composition, I did bring Azhag, and I think Azhag is honestly has always been and still is essentially the best lord you can bring as the Greenskins. I brought him on, of course, Skullmuncher with 3 spells. I brought in Spirit Leech, Doom and Darkness, and Fate of Buna. Of course, he does have the trait Life Leeching, which improves my power recharge rate when I'm casting. He does, of course, have Foe Seeker, just in case my opponent brings a Flying Goon Squad, which Chaos can sometimes bring, just so I can make sure to escape. And finally, Wah to boost my allies' melee attack by a pretty significant margin. Azhag, of course, hits like a truck. He has 480 armor piercing damage, decent melee attack, but that causes poison though, which is very nice. And his melee defense is bad, but he has a huge charge bonus, so he's very capable of cycle charging, and he's very quick on his wings, I guess, with 110 speed. So a very survivable lord against Chaos. You can kind of kite him and whittle him down with Lore of Death, because Lore of Death is absolutely amazing. Now, my hope is that if my opponent brings a lot of units susceptible to terror bombs, I can terror bomb them with the help of Skullmuncher. Now, our front line is composed entirely of Black Orcs. I have 3 units of Black Orcs, as well as the Crimson Killers here. The Crimson Killers are a bit of an iffy choice against. I'm not entirely sure they are the best choice against Chaos, but I wanted to try them out as well. These guys have very solid melee stats. Slightly better armor actually than the vanilla Black Orcs. And I do believe they might actually have, they have comparable HP per, I think they have the same HP per model, but there is less of them. And they also do more damage per model, and of course they have AoE damage, so they can potentially tear, if it's a densely clumped unit, especially for example Chaos Warriors, these guys should perform pretty well against them, arguably better than normal Black Orcs, especially initially. On the flanks, I do actually have 2 units of Nasty Skulkers, veteraned up a decent amount. Nasty Skulkers, my hope is that I will be able to tie my opponent down with Black Orcs. The Nasty Skulkers will collapse from the flanks, and that's when their ability will kick in, Opportunist Murder, which boosts their melee attack by a huge amount when they're winning, and their armor-piercing damage by 40%. So it makes them absolute murder machines if you can get them on the flanks and get them winning an engagement. Behind that, I do have the Rusty Arrows, as well as vanilla Night Goblin Archers, veteraned up a little bit. These guys are just there to provide some pressure against my opponents. If my opponent brings, for example, Skirmish Cavalry, or if my opponent brings some Flying Lords or that sort of stuff, they're just there to apply some pressure to them, or apply pressure to Kolek in this case. On the flanks, I do have 1 unit of Orc Boar by Big Guns over there, and I do have another unit of Orc by Big Guns here, tied down with a Goblin Big Boss on a Spider. Of course, that gives him some mobility, and of course poison, which is the main reason to bring him. Slippery, of course, has been buffed in this in Mortal Empire, so it now provides melee defense, so it's now a very useful skill to bring. Finally, I do have a Night Goblin Shaman. As you might have noticed, I'm not actually bringing Sneaky Stealing on him, and that's because Sneaky Stealing has been nerfed. It now only takes effect when you're casting, and in my opinion, that's simply not really worth it when I'm bringing Azhag, and we'll probably be casting from him as well. However, the Night Goblin Shaman does have a pretty fancy ability here, the Wand of Jet, which gives him increased power reserves and improved power recharge rate, which is pretty cool. Also, Itching Nuisance and Sneaky Stabbing are both very useful, very cheap spells that could supplement Azhag's buffs, or Azhag's debuffs really, and damage spells. My opponent brought a very elite army, and it was a bit interesting. I thought I was going incredibly elite with my build, going with so many Black Orcs. My opponent decided to one-up me and bring a bunch of Chosen. So my opponent does have, on the flanks, he does have Chaos Marauders on this end with great weapons. He has Chaos Warriors with great weapons on this end. So his flanks are a little weak, but in the middle he does have a mix of Chosen, normal Chosen, and Chosen with great weapons. These guys, of course, hit very hard. They have armor piercing. They have crazy armor. So had I brought no armor, or had I brought, for example, Savage Orcs, which are a fairly common pick from Orcs, I would have been in much bigger trouble here. But these guys, their armor is not really going to hold up very well to most of my armor piercing troops here. Behind that, my opponent does have a unit of Aspiring Champions just to provide some encouragement. Kolek, of course, because Kolek is a monster in melee, especially with Star Crusher, he hits like a truck, and Orcs don't have the best backline pressure, so he can kind of run around amok and do whatever the heck he wants. He does also have a built-in, I do believe it's 30% missile resistance, yeah, 25%. You can see I'm using my archers to focus one of the units of Chosen. These guys won't do amazing against them, but just trying to get some damage in before the lines meet. Because, of course, I actually did not read the icons on the units, and I glanced over, saw the Chosen, and I kind of assumed my opponent just brought a front line entirely of Chosen. And so I was definitely getting a little worried here, thinking that my Black Orcs, of course, would get outmatched pretty badly. As is, they're still going to get outmatched just a bit. Beyond that, my opponent does have some Dragon Ogres to apply anti-large fear and just kind of as a cavalry supplement, really. And these guys are, of course, a pretty powerful unit, and they'll do well against large units, and they've gotten those extra 3 models with the last patch. And then finally, my opponent does have a Chaos Sorcerer of Death with the usual Fate of Buna and Spirit Leech. No attempt at Doom and Darkness like me, though that's actually a pretty powerful combo with Kolek, because Kolek does cause Terran plow through enemy units and get easy rear charges or rear attacks. Regardless, I'm enveloping my opponent, making use of my greater numbers. My opponent does cast a Fate of Buna on these poor Black Orcs over here. Fortunately, with their beefed up HP, these guys will not take quite as much damage, but you can see there, and despite tearing through the Chaos Mirage pretty quickly, they will start losing to the Chosen. I counteract by dropping a Doom and Darkness and jumping Azhag into my opponent's backline and just trying to rout off his troops, so these Chaos Mirage break very quickly. Over here, in the meantime, my opponent's troops have kind of broken apart. I've popped Wa, so these Chosen will start losing, hopefully, fairly quickly. I did drop a Itchy Nuisance here in the center. My opponent has gotten Kolek through onto my backline, which is kind of to be expected. I'm not really going to be able to deal with him very effectively. But my opponent's front line here is kind of collapsed. The Dragon Ogres are trading somewhat effectively with the Orc Boar Boy Big Guns, but you can see they're just getting overwhelmed, and they're getting poisoned, and they're just getting slowly but surely beaten down, despite the fact that standard die does go down from Kolek. In the meantime, I finally remembered my Nasty Skulkers, which I actually completely forgot about. Over here on the flank, you can see the Chosen. The Chaos Warriors Grey Weapons have made very short work. They've actually made absolute mincemeat of these poor Black Orcs. The Black Orcs still gave a decent account of themselves. They beat these Chosen down by 14 models and about half their HP. Maybe a little more, but these Nasty Skulkers in the meantime have kind of recovered, and they're now running rampant, going after these Chosen and trying to just help my Black Orcs win. I made a huge mistake by not pulling the Skulkers in. I was trying to make sure they stayed stealthed as long as possible so my opponent wouldn't catch wind of what I was trying to do, and then I forgot about them. So, big mistake on there. One of those things that unfortunately happens. Over here, Kolek was laying the smackdown on poor Azhag, so I immediately tried to run away. Azhag is, of course, pretty mobile and quick on his feet, so I'm able to get out of dodge pretty quickly. Star Crusher has been popped, which gives him massive damage. But I'm trying to surround him with Orc Boar Boy Big Guns, and slowly, and with the help of some poison arrows, beat him down. My Big Boss has come back into the fray. He's, of course, not really a match for Kolek, but hopefully he can help. Kolek, in the meantime, is helping out over here with these Chosen and the Chaos Sorcerer of Death and all these guys, just applying some back pressure. But what I do, once again, I drop Doom and Darkness and drop Azhag in the middle. I didn't break Aspect of the Dread Knight simply because I have Terror on Azhag. Azhag does take a nasty hit here from the Kolek, but I do pop the Smoke Bomb on my Nasty Skulkers, which will slow down Kolek. And now you can see with the Terror kicking in, these units are just going to start routing, and my opponent is basically going to lose this entire pocket. You can see the Dragon Ogres have been kicked off the field for good. The Orc Boar Boy Big Guns are recovering their morale. These Aspiring Champions, while they're very good for their cost, and they can tie down troops for a long amount of time, they're not going to be able to trade effectively with the Goblin Big Boss and my troops. They're not going to do enough damage, really. A very nice Stormcaller does go down, but Kolek is now being focused down very heavily by the 2 units of archers. You can see over here the Black Orcs and Chosen are winning against the, Black Orcs and Nasty Skulkers are winning against the Chosen. And I do drop Azhag on top of these Chosen with great weapons, just trying to rout them. Chosen are, of course, susceptible to Terror. I have popped Wa. I do believe I've actually wandered out. By wandering around with Azhag, I'm actually taking away the buff from these guys who could kind of make good use of it. These Black Orcs are collapsing on Kolek, just trying to lay the smackdown on him. But my opponent is at this point in a very poor position, with only really the Aspiring Champions and a handful of Chaos Marauders and Chosen still around and kicking. But you can see with the fact that I do have some slightly better numbers, my Nasty Skulkers are capable of running down these Chosen, chasing them off the field. They've actually gained some veterancy, and they're racking up nasty amounts of kills here, chasing and breaking these guys, and they do shatter at this point. And you can see poor Kolek over here. He is going after the Night Goblin Archers, but that's too little too late. These guys are basically out of ammo anyway, so it's no big loss for me. And Kolek is at this point very badly beaten up, and though Kolek is mobile, of course, I could run him down at this point between Azhag and the Big Boss and Big Guns and all that sort of stuff. So it does come down to a Pyrrhic victory for me. Was a very tight match. You can see the Nasty Skulkers gave a good accounting of themselves, though a lot of it came down to getting some sneaky backdoor attacks and chasing some fleeing units. I definitely made some major mistakes in this game. My first and foremost mistake was the fact that I committed my Nasty Skulkers too late. I should have committed them much sooner, and had I done so, I would have been able to roll up my opponent's flanks and been much more effective there. My opponent committed with kind of committed himself to a very elite strategy, um, which could have perhaps worked against a lighter orc build, for example, with Savage Orcs. But the over-reliance Chosen are, of course, very susceptible to the fate of Buna, which, of course, Azhag is a pretty common pick, and so they're pretty susceptible to that. They're not the greatest trade with Black Orcs. Generally, if you watch most YouTubers or even me, when I occasionally play Chaos, I do believe the general consensus is that Chaos Warriors great weapons are the way to go, just because they're cheaper and more cost efficient. The Chosen, I think you can see that they definitely did a lot of hurt, and of course, but it's important to keep in mind that a lot of these kills would have been against Nasty Skulkers, which is who lost a decent amount of models. So that's not that impressive a kill count. And the only unit of Black Orcs, well, actually, several of the units of Black Orcs got beaten down pretty badly, but they definitely gave a good accounting of themselves. Crimson Killers, I'm not entirely sure. I feel like they kind of underperformed a little bit. They didn't do that great against the Chosen. I feel like I might have been better off squeezing in an extra unit of Orc Archer, Arrow Boys, or maybe even some Nasty Skulkers by dropping some Chevrons and replacing the Crimson Killers with a unit of vanilla Black Orcs. Kolik, of course, did very well. I definitely, once again, I made use of the Doom and Darkness, and I think that's definitely one of those things people don't really expect. They kind of don't expect it from Orcs. They actually don't really expect it from anybody bringing the Lore of Death. They forget. Orcs aren't well known for bringing a lot of fear or terror to the field, and definitely not known for being able to fast break troops. So I think Doom and Darkness catches a lot of people by surprise, and I would definitely recommend trying it out in your games, guys. If you kind of want to try something fun that potentially a little trolly. Definitely look to try out some Doom and Darkness cheese. If you're going against a faction that doesn't bring a lot of immunity to psychology, then Doom and Darkness Terror Bomb combos are actually pretty potent. And obviously it varies by faction. Some factions will bring a very resistant front line or potentially bring a resistant front line. Usually I would recommend bringing Doom and Darkness and then a few units with... and then, of course, bring Fate of Buna and Spirit Leech, just in case your opponent brings a composition that's resistant to Doom and Darkness. Some factions I wouldn't really bother with it. In the case of, for example, the Wood Elves, who have the vast majority of the Wood Elf units are immune to psychology or ridiculous, or have ridiculous morale, for example. Or Dwarves, it's not really that useful. But against some of the other factions, for example, Chaos or Chaos, Greenskins, of course, and those sorts of factions, Beastmen. It can be a very potent tool. So definitely a good game to my opponent. It was a lot of fun just doing this sort of cheese strat and running a bunch of armor-piercing units and having a lot of fun that way. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below for additional content. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.